Captain Krell thought he had just stolen the greatest treasure in the galaxy. He was wrong. He had just signed his own death warrant. Inside the high-tech human pod was no gold. No weapons. Just a small, soft, orange ball of fur that looked harmless. To the pirates, it was a joke. To the old navigator, it was the most dangerous creature in the known universe. Xylas had seen planets burn for this creature. He knew that humans didn't own cats. They served them. Before the pirates could laugh again, space itself began to rip apart. The humans had arrived for their master. Return the cat, or watch your world burn. The choice was simple. The terror was just beginning. The metal walls of the pirate ship, the Zog-Vulture, vibrated with the sound of deep, alien laughter. Captain Krell, a massive creature with 4 muscular arms and thick, gray scales, was celebrating. He stood in the center of the bridge, surrounded by his crew of scavengers and thieves. They had just finished a raid on a small human transport ship. The humans had surrendered almost immediately, fleeing in escape pods as soon as the pirates boarded. They had left behind their cargo, but it wasn't the gold or the fuel the pirates expected. Instead, the humans seemed most desperate to protect one single, high-tech pod. The pod was small, white, and very soft on the inside. It had its own climate control and a self-cleaning system. To Captain Krell, this meant only one thing: the item inside was more valuable than any diamond. He believed they had stolen a biological weapon or perhaps a royal alien larva that the humans were transporting in secret. The crew gathered around, their many eyes glowing with greed. They whispered about how much money they would make on the black market. Krell reached out with 2 of his large hands and pressed the release button on the pod. With a soft hiss, the pod opened. The pirates leaned in, expecting to see something glowing or dangerous. Instead, they saw a small, orange ball of fur. It had 4 tiny paws, a long tail wrapped around its body, and 2 pointed ears. The creature opened its eyes, bright green and full of mystery. It looked at the giant, scary aliens, and did not run. It did not scream. It simply stretched its legs, let out a long yawn, and said one word: meow. The biological asset was a domestic house cat named Ginger. For a moment, there was total silence on the Zog-Vulture. Then, the room exploded with laughter. Krell's second-in-command, a thin alien with 3 eyes, pointed at the cat and mocked it. He couldn't believe they had wasted their time for a tiny, soft creature that looked like it couldn't even hunt a space rat. The pirates thought the humans were even weaker than they had heard. They joked about how the humans were probably crying over this little toy. They felt powerful and invincible. However, in the corner of the room, the ship's old navigator, Xylas, was not laughing. Xylas was the oldest member of the crew and had traveled to the edges of the human territories many years ago. His skin turned a pale shade of blue, a sign of extreme terror among his species. His hands were shaking so hard he had to lean against a computer console. He watched the orange cat walk out of the pod and start licking its paw. To the others, it was a joke. To Xylas, it was a death sentence. Shut up. All of you, shut up. Xylas suddenly screamed. His voice was cracked with fear. The laughter stopped instantly. The crew looked at the old navigator in confusion. Captain Krell walked over to him, his heavy boots thumping on the metal floor. Krell looked down at Xylas and asked why he was so scared of a tiny animal that didn't even have teeth long enough to bite through their armor. Krell even reached down to poke the cat, but Ginger simply moved his head out of the way with a bored expression. Xylas looked Krell directly in the eyes. "You idiot," he whispered. "Do you have any idea what you have done? You didn't just steal a pet. You stole a feline from Earth. You think the humans are the masters of their world? You are wrong. Humans built cities, but they built them for these creatures. They serve them. They feed them. They protect them with their lives. On Earth, these are the apex predators of the spirit. They are the only things that humans truly love without logic." The crew looked at the cat again. Ginger was now busy trying to catch a small piece of dust floating in the air. He looked completely harmless. But Xylas continued, his voice getting louder and more frantic. I have seen humans burn down entire space stations because someone hurt a feline. They don't use logic when it comes to these creatures. If the Human Federation finds out we have their Master Ginger, they won't ask for him back. They won't negotiate. They will erase us. They will erase our ship, our families, and our entire sector from the star maps just to make sure the cat is safe. Krell started to feel a cold shiver down his spine. He looked at the orange cat, who was now staring at a blinking red light on the control panel. The cat's eyes were wide, and it looked like it was calculating something. For the first time, the cat didn't look cute to Krell, it looked like a tiny, silent judge. The atmosphere on the bridge changed from celebration to heavy, thick silence. The pirates realized that they hadn't stolen a treasure, they had stolen a ticking time bomb, just as Krell opened his mouth to order the crew to put the cat back in the pod and throw it into space. A loud, piercing alarm began to scream throughout the ship. The red emergency lights started flashing. The ship's computer voice spoke in a calm but terrifying tone, warning. Massive gravitational signature detected. Warp jump incoming in 0 seconds. The Zog-Vulture shook violently as a massive object pushed its way into their space. The crew ran to the main view screen. Their hearts stopped. A human warship, the SS Vengeance, had just dropped out of light speed right next to them. It was 5 times the size of their pirate ship and covered in heavy laser cannons. The human ship didn't send a greeting. It didn't ask them to surrender. It simply locked all its weapons onto the Zog-Vulture. On the bridge of the pirate ship, Ginger the cat sat down on the captain's chair and started cleaning his ears. The humans were here, and they were not in a good mood. The bridge of the Zog-Vulture was no longer a place of celebration, it was a room filled with pure, unfiltered panic. The massive human warship sat outside their window like a silent mountain of metal, its weapons glowing with a deadly blue light. Captain Krell roared at his crew to move, his 4 arms waving wildly in the air. He knew he had to get that orange creature back into its pod and send it over to the humans before they were turned into space dust. Catch it. Catch that beast right now. Krell screamed, pointing at Ginger. But Ginger was no longer sitting calmly on the chair. The loud alarms and the flashing red lights had woken up his hunting instincts. The pirate's second-in-command, a tall and skinny alien named Vark, lunged toward the cat with a heavy metal net. To a human, it would have looked like a clumsy man trying to catch a butterfly, but to the aliens, this was a high-stakes battle. Ginger saw the net coming and moved with a speed that the aliens had never seen before. In one smooth motion, the cat arched its back, hissed like a tiny dragon, and leaped 3 times its own height. He landed right on Vark's head. With a quick swipe, Ginger's sharp claws dug into Vark's rubbery skin. The alien let out a high-pitched scream, falling backward and dropping the net. He looked at his hand, where 3 thin red lines were bleeding. It's toxic. Vark yelled in terror. The beast has injected me with a biological melting agent. My blood is leaking. Of course, it was just a normal cat scratch, but the pirates had never seen blood like a human's, and the stinging pain felt like fire to them. The rest of the crew backed away in horror. They watched as Ginger landed softly on the floor, his tail twitching with excitement. To the pirates, the cat didn't look like a pet anymore. It looked like a professional assassin. Ginger began to run, his orange fur a blur of motion as he dodged between the legs of the giant pirates. Every time someone tried to grab him, Ginger was already somewhere else. He was practicing a game of zoom eyes, but to the pirates, it looked like he was mapping their ship's defenses. Suddenly, Ginger spotted a small opening in the wall, a maintenance vent that led to the ship's internal wiring and air systems. With a final, mocking meow, the cat vanished into the dark tunnel. Captain Krell ran to the vent and tried to reach inside, but his arms were far too thick. He hit the wall in frustration. Get the scanners, he ordered. I want to know exactly where that predator is going. The crew rushed to their computer stations, pulling up a digital map of the ship. They saw a small, heat-emitting dot moving through the ventilation shafts at an incredible speed. The suspense grew as the dot moved toward the ship's engine room. "No," the old navigator Xylas cried out. "He is heading for the core. He knows exactly where our power source is." In reality, Ginger was just following the warmth of the engines because he wanted a nice place to nap, but the pirates were convinced the cat was a sabotage expert. Suddenly, the lights on the bridge flickered and turned off. A loud grinding noise echoed through the floors. Ginger had reached a bundle of wires and, feeling a bit bored, had decided to chew on one that looked particularly tasty. "He's cutting our power," one of the pirates screamed in the dark. "He's disabling our shields so the human warship can fire." The crew began to lose their minds. They were trained to fight space soldiers and giant monsters, but they had no idea how to fight a 10-pound ball of fur that they couldn't even see. Every sound in the vents sounded like a footstep. Every shadow looked like a pair of glowing green eyes. The pirates stood back to back, pointing their laser blasters at the ceiling, terrified that the orange demon would drop down on them at any moment. As the backup red lights kicked in, a cold, electronic voice filled the bridge. It was a transmission from the human warship outside. The face of a human commander appeared on the screen, and he looked incredibly angry. "Pirate vessel," the commander said, his voice deep and steady. "Our sensors show that our civilian asset is moving through your ventilation system. If a single hair on his head is damaged, or if he gets a speck of dust in his lungs, we will not take prisoners. You have 5 minutes to surrender your ship and present the asset to us on a velvet pillow. If you fail, we will use our gravity beams to crush your ship into a ball the size of a fruit." Captain Krell looked at the screen and then at the dark vent where Ginger had disappeared. He realized they were trapped between a giant warship and a tiny, invisible hunter. The cat was now playing with a loose screw he had found, knocking it against the metal pipe. To the pirates, the clink-clink-clink sound echoed through the ship like the ticking of a bomb. They realized that they weren't the ones who had captured the cat had captured them. The great mistake was becoming a total nightmare, and the real chaos was only just beginning. The clock was ticking, and every second felt like a heavy hammer hitting the floor of the Zog-Vulture. 5 minutes. That was all the time the human warship had given them before they turned the pirate ship into a cloud of dust. Captain Krell was sweating, a thick green liquid dripping down his scaly forehead. He looked at his crew, who were all staring at the ventilation opening with wide, terrified eyes. They could hear Ginger moving inside the walls. Thump. Scratch. Meow. To the pirates, these were the sounds of a master saboteur preparing their final doom. They had to get the cat out, but they were too afraid to go in. "We must negotiate," Xylas, the old navigator, whispered. He was clutching a tablet that showed the cat's thermal signature. "We cannot use force. We have seen what happened to Vark's hand. The creature is fast and poisonous. We must offer it a tribute. We must give it something it desires so it will come out of its own free will." Krell nodded quickly. He ordered the ship's cook to bring out the most expensive delicacy they had on board, the liver of a blue space whale. It was a meat so rare that it cost more than the ship itself. It was soft, glowing with a faint purple light, and smelled like rich minerals. The pirates placed the meat on a golden tray and set it right in front of the vent opening. They all backed away, hiding behind their control stations, watching from a distance. "Come out, O mighty one," Krell whispered, his voice trembling. "Accept our apology. Accept this meat and stop destroying our ship." For a long minute, nothing happened. Then, 2 glowing green eyes appeared in the darkness of the vent. Ginger stuck his head out, his little pink nose twitching as he smelled the expensive alien meat. The pirates held their breath. They thought they were witnessing a historic moment of peace. Ginger walked out slowly, his orange fur looking bright against the cold metal floor. He sniffed the blue space whale liver. He licked it once. The pirates started to smile, thinking they were saved. But then, Ginger's expression changed. He looked at the meat with total disgust. He turned around, lifted his back leg, and performed a scratching motion on the floor, as if he was trying to bury a piece of trash. To a human, this was just a cat saying the food was bad. To the pirates, this was a terrifying ritual. "He is burying us!" Vark screamed from the back. "He has rejected our offering. He is marking this ship for death." Ginger, bored with the food, decided he wanted to play instead. He spotted a dangling holographic wire near the ceiling. He jumped with incredible grace, catching the light with his paws. As he swung from the wire, he accidentally stepped on a control panel. Suddenly, the ship's gravity began to flip. One moment the pirates were on the floor, and the next, they were crashing into the ceiling. Ginger, however, landed perfectly on his feet on the ceiling, walking around as if gravity meant nothing to him. The pirates were screaming, floating in the air, while the cat looked down at them with a calm, superior gaze. On the view screen, the human commander appeared again. He looked even more frustrated than before. "What are you doing to Mr. Ginger?" he barked. "Our sensors show the ship is tumbling. If the cat gets motion sickness, I will personally make sure your planet never sees another sunrise." Krell was pinned against the ceiling by the gravity shift, struggling to speak. We are not doing anything," he yelled. "The cat is doing it. He is walking on the ceiling. He is a gravity bender." The human commander paused for a second, then sighed. "Oh, he's just doing backflips. That means he's bored." "You idiots, you haven't even entertained him." The gravity suddenly snapped back to normal, dropping the pirates hard onto the floor. Ginger was now sitting on top of the main navigation computer, his tail hitting the self-destruct button cover repeatedly. Tack every time the cat's tail hit the plastic cover, the pirates felt their hearts stop. They realized they were no longer in control of their ship, their mission, or their lives. The tiny orange creature was the true captain now. He wasn't even trying to be mean, he was just being a cat, but in a high-tech alien environment, a cat was more dangerous than a nuclear bomb. Xylas looked at the scanner and let out a sob. Another ship. Another human ship is arriving. He was right. On the radar, 3 more human vessels appeared out of nowhere. They weren't warships, they were fast-response animal rescue ships. The humans hadn't just sent the military, they had sent a full rescue team for one single cat. The pirates realized then that the biological asset wasn't a weapon or a royal. It was something much more dangerous. It was a beloved family member of a species that didn't know how to give up. The suspense was reaching its breaking point as the docking bay doors of the Zog-Vulture began to groan under the pressure of a forced entry. The Zog-Vulture was now a ship of shadows. The power levels had dropped to critical, and the main lights were replaced by a pulsing, dim red emergency glow. Smoke drifted through the hallways from the wires Ginger had chewed earlier. The pirate crew, once a group of feared space bandits, were now huddled together in the center of the bridge, holding their weapons with shaking hands. They were no longer worried about the human warships outside, they were terrified of the orange demon that was stalking them in the dark. To the aliens, every creak of the metal hull and every hiss of the ventilation system sounded like the cat preparing to strike. Captain Krell whispered to his men to stay silent, but the silence only made the suspense worse. Suddenly, they heard a soft thump from the ceiling pipes. Then, 2 glowing green circles appeared in the darkness above them. It was Ginger. In the dim light, the cat's eyes reflected the red emergency lamps, making him look like a creature from a nightmare. Ginger wasn't trying to be scary, he simply had excellent night vision and was curious about why the big aliens were standing so still. He let out a low, vibrating sound, a purr. But to the pirates, this purr sounded like the low-frequency hum of a biological engine preparing to explode. "It's charging its weapon." Vark hissed, pointing his shaking finger upward. Ginger decided it was time for more zoom eyes. He leaped from the pipe, bounced off a computer screen, and blurred past the pirate's legs at incredible speed. To the aliens, it looked like the creature was teleporting. They began firing their laser pistols wildly, but Ginger was far too fast. He wasn't even being shot at, the pirates were so panicked they were hitting their own equipment. "Stop firing. You're going to hit the life support." Krell roared, but it was too late. One stray laser hit a water pipe, and a jet of cold mist sprayed into the air, adding to the confusion and making the ship look even more haunted. The cat then decided to play a game of hide and seek. He vanished into the shadows of a storage locker. One of the pirates, a young soldier named Trog, was sent to check the locker. He slowly opened the door, his heart beating like a drum. Inside, he saw nothing but darkness. Suddenly, a small, furry paw reached out from the blackness and gently bopped Trog on the nose. It was a playful tap, but Trog screamed as if he had been stabbed. He fell backward, crawling away as fast as he could. "He touched me. The beast has marked me for death. I can feel the curse spreading." He was actually just fine, but the psychological warfare of the cat was breaking the crew's spirits. While the pirates were busy being terrified of a 10-pound house cat, the human, fast response ships had finally finished cutting through the outer docking bay doors. The entire ship groaned as the metal was ripped open by high-powered human lasers. The pirates were trapped. Behind them was a door being melted by angry humans, and in front of them, somewhere in the smoke and shadows, was an orange predator that they believed could turn invisible and walk on walls. They were caught between a hammer and a very fluffy anvil. Krell looked at his remaining crew and realized they had no choice. They couldn't fight the humans, and they definitely couldn't catch the cat. As the docking bay doors finally blew inward with a loud explosion, a squad of human soldiers in heavy black armor marched in. They held shields and advanced in a perfect line. But the pirates didn't even try to shoot back. Captain Krell threw his weapon on the floor and fell to his knees, his 4 arms raised high in the air. "Take it. Take the beast," Krell pleaded, his voice breaking. "We surrender. Just take your monster and leave us our lives. He has destroyed our ship. He has cursed our souls. We are finished." The human soldiers stopped, looking at each other in confusion through their helmets. They had expected a massive space battle, not a group of crying aliens begging them to take a cat away. The suspense hung heavy in the air as the smoke began to clear. The human leader stepped forward, his heavy boots clanking on the metal. He didn't look at the pirates, he looked around the room, searching for something. The pirates watched, terrified, wondering what kind of weapon the human would use to tame the beast. Would they use a gravity cage? A stasis field? Or perhaps a heavy-duty tranquilizer? The silence was broken by a soft, high-pitched scratching sound from under a nearby console. Ginger poked his head out, looked at the armored humans, and let out a very loud, very demanding meow that seemed to say, "It's about time you got here." The bridge of the Zog-Vulture was frozen in time. The pirate crew remained on their knees, their many limbs shaking as they stared at the human soldiers. These were not just any soldiers, they were the elite, void jumper units, covered in thick, matte black armor that absorbed the red emergency lights of the ship. Their weapons were pointed at the ground, but their presence felt like a heavy weight pressing down on the aliens. Captain Krell watched through his 4 tear-filled eyes as the lead human soldier stepped forward. The human's boots made a rhythmic, terrifying clank 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 on the metal floor. Krell waited for the fire, for the lasers, or for the execution. He was sure his life was over because they had kidnapped a god of Earth. Suddenly, the lead human reached up and did something that shocked the pirates. He unlocked his helmet. A hiss of air escaped as the pressure equalized, and the soldier pulled the helmet off, revealing a rugged face with a short beard. To the pirates, this was a move of incredible madness. How could he expose his soft, vulnerable neck to the orange demon hiding under the console? Did the human not realize that Ginger was an apex predator? Xylas, the old navigator, gasped. He believed the human was offering his own life as a sacrifice to the cat in exchange for the safety of the rest of the fleet. The room was so quiet that you could hear the distant hum of the ship's failing ventilation. The human commander ignored the pirates completely. He knelt down on one knee, a gesture the aliens immediately interpreted as a high-ranking religious ritual. He lowered his head and began to make a strange, rhythmic noise that the pirate translators could not understand. It was a sharp, clicking sound. The aliens looked at each other in total confusion. Their computer systems tried to analyze the sound, but it didn't match any known language. "It's a sonic spell," Vark whispered to Krell. "He is using a secret frequency to communicate with the beast's brain. It's ancient human magic." The pirates watched with wide eyes, expecting the cat to explode out from under the desk and rip the human's face off. Ginger, the orange cat, did not attack. Instead, he slowly poked his head out from under the computer console. He looked at the human commander for a long moment, his green eyes glowing in the dark. The human didn't move. He kept making the PS sound and held out a single finger. Ginger let out a soft mew and began to walk toward the human. The pirates were amazed. The vicious hunter that had just disabled their ship and terrified their bravest warriors was now acting like a harmless kitten. As Ginger reached the human, he rubbed his face against the soldier's armored hand. The human let out a deep breath of relief and began to scratch the cat behind the ears. The aliens were horrified and fascinated at the same time. To them, it looked like the human was using some kind of life force siphon. Every time the human scratched the cat, Ginger's purr grew louder, vibrating through the metal floor and into the pirate's bones. "Look!" Xylas pointed with a trembling hand. "The beast is vibrating. The human is charging the creature with energy. They are merging their spirits." The pirates were convinced they were witnessing a forbidden bond between a warrior and his familiar. The fact that the human was smiling and talking in a soft, baby voice to the cat only made it scarier. To the pirates, it sounded like a dark incantation to seal a blood pact. The human commander picked up Ginger, cradling him in his arms like he was the most precious treasure in the galaxy. He looked at his soldiers and nodded. Then, he finally turned his gaze toward Captain Krell. The warmth he showed the cat instantly vanished. His eyes became as cold as deep space. "You have no idea how lucky you are," the commander said, his voice echoing through the bridge. "If Mr. Ginger had a single broken claw, my orders were to turn this ship into a graveyard. You stole from the wrong species, and you stole the wrong thing." He turned around and began to walk back toward the human docking ship, carrying the cat like a king. The pirates didn't move. They watched as the black-armored soldiers slowly backed out of the room, their weapons still ready. The suspense didn't leave the room even after the humans were gone. They felt like they had just escaped a black hole. They had seen the PS ritual, a power they couldn't understand. Krell looked at his ruined bridge, his scratched-up second-in-command, and the empty pod where the cat had been. They were alive, but they were broken. They had learned a lesson that would be told in pirate bars for 1,000 years. Humans are dangerous, but if you touch their small, furry masters, the entire universe will come for your soul. The human soldiers had finally left, their heavy boots no longer echoing through the metal hallways of the Zog-Vulture. The docking bay was a twisted mess of torn metal and smoke, but the pirate ship was suddenly, eerily silent. Captain Krell sat on the floor of the bridge, his 4 arms resting on his knees. He looked around at his crew. Vark was still nursing his scratched hand, looking at it as if it were a ticking bomb. Xylas, the old navigator, was staring at the empty white pod where the cat had first been discovered. The silence was not peaceful, it was heavy with the realization of how close they had come to total extinction. They were alive, but they felt like ghosts in a graveyard. Suddenly, the main viewscreen flickered back to life one last time. It wasn't the commander this time. It was a video feed from the bridge of the human warship, the SS Vengeance. The screen showed the human bridge crew, but they weren't looking at the pirates. They were all gathered around a small table where Ginger was happily eating a bowl of what looked like golden cream. One of the humans was petting him, and another was filming the cat with a small device. They looked happy, almost like children. But then, the human admiral stepped into the frame, his face turning into stone as he looked at the camera. He was speaking directly to the pirates. "You are still alive because Mr. Ginger is in a good mood," the admiral said, his voice cold and sharp. "But before we leave you to your broken ship, I want you to see what you almost triggered." The admiral pressed a button, and the screen split in two. On one side was the video of the cat. On the other side was a tactical map of the pirates' home sector. Krell's eyes widened. Every major planet in their system was highlighted in red. Huge human carrier ships were already positioned near their suns, their weapons ready to fire. "This was the Plan B," the admiral continued. "If that cat had been harmed, we weren't just going to destroy your ship. We were going to collapse your sun and turn your entire star system into a cold, dark void." The pirates felt their hearts stop. They had known humans were protective, but they never imagined a species would destroy an entire civilization over a small, orange animal that didn't even speak. "Humans have a saying," the admiral said, leaning closer to the camera. "Don't poke the bear. But we have a newer saying in the galaxy, don't touch the cat. You have been officially blacklisted from every trade route. If we see your ship signature again, we won't wait for a cat to hiss. We will fire." The screen went black, and a moment later, the massive human warship vanished into a flash of blue light as it jumped into warp speed. The Zog-Vulture drifted in the darkness, half-powered and broken. Krell looked at the empty pod and then at the screen. He realized that the cat wasn't just a pet or a biological asset. To the humans, that cat was a symbol of their home, their peace, and their mercy. When the pirates took the cat, they took the only thing keeping the humans from being monsters. Without their tiny masters to keep them soft, the humans were the most terrifying force in the universe. The pirates had been playing with a fire that could have burned down the stars, and they didn't even know it until the flames were at their throats. Xylas stood up slowly and walked to the control panel, his bones creaking. He began to delete all the coordinates of human space from their navigation records. "Where are you going, navigator?" Krell asked, his voice a whisper. Xylas didn't look back. "I am taking us to the farthest, loneliest corner of the galaxy, Captain," he replied. "I want to be somewhere where there are no humans and definitely no cats. I have seen enough horror for 10 lifetimes." The crew nodded in agreement. They didn't want gold. They didn't want fuel. They just wanted to be far away from a species that loved its small predators, enough to kill a galaxy for them. The ship slowly turned and moved away into the deep blackness of space. As it moved, a small, orange hair floated in the air of the bridge, catching the dim red light. Vark saw it, screamed in terror, and ran out of the room. The legend of the Orange Demon would grow over the years, becoming a ghost story told by alien pirates to their children. And the lesson was always the same: if you see a human ship, you might survive. If you see a human soldier, you might escape. But if you see a human's cat, you run as fast as your legs can carry you, because behind that tiny meow is the end of the world.